Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on the Kautilya School of Public Policy's Let's Talk Policy series. And we're so thrilled to have with us a person who is a hero and an idol for so many millions of Indians. Abhinav Bindra is India's only individual Olympic gold medalist, an honor that he won for India back in the Summer Olympics of 2008. He's also won 9 medals at the Commonwealth Games, 3 gold medals at the Asian Games, and with more than 150 medals overall to his name, he's had an incredible career that's also made him the recipient of the Padma Bhushan Award. As the Indian contingent now heads to Tokyo for the delayed Olympic Games, we are thrilled to have Abhinav Bindra join us here at the Kautilya School of Public Policy. Abhinav, thank you so much for being with us. Firstly, these games are particularly special, the ones that are happening in Tokyo, aren't they? Because first, they've been delayed by a year because of COVID, but that COVID threat isn't over, and it hangs like a big shadow over these games too.
Yeah, firstly, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for that warm introduction, which I hope will change in a few weeks a little bit, and I will no longer be the only Indian individual gold medalist, and I do hope that we will win many medals in Tokyo in a couple of weeks down the road. Yes, of course, these games are unique. There's going to be a games like never before, with all the restrictions which are going to be enforced and all the COVID rules which athletes and everybody concerned will have to follow. It's going to be a sporting event like no other, because the IOC, the Olympic Committee, is taking many steps to mitigate it. But of course, the danger still looms, and there are concerns. But I think with 80% of athletes attending the games already being vaccinated, I think is a little bit, we can cling on to that hope a little bit. In regards to spectators, we don't quite know, although the Japanese have allowed a certain amount of spectators, but that could again change over the next couple of weeks. Of course, I think the games remain relevant. I think the Olympic Games is much more than just a sporting event. It is a sign of the world coming together. It's a sign of the world uniting. The Olympic Village, for example, in a couple of weeks will perhaps be the most unique place on the planet. You'll have people from 206 countries and one Olympic refugee team living together in peace and harmony, with a spirit of friendship and respect, and peacefully competing in intense competition. So this is an event which I believe is very relevant to the world, especially with all what's gone on in the last couple of years with the pandemic. We've of course seen a great degree of nationalism in many ways across the world. We've seen a great degree of egoism around the world. And I think the Olympic Games is a binding factor. And I think the event goes far beyond just sporting competition. And the values that the Games imbibe, I think, is something that the world needs a reminder of. So I am looking forward to the Olympic Games. And I, of course, do hope that they will happen in a safe and a secure environment for everybody and everybody involved.
You actually put it so beautifully about why the games are important and what they actually represent. And you had some days ago put out a very lovely message for the Indian contingent, saying that the pandemic had forced them to also change their training plans. Just to ask you, as an athlete, you know the kind of effort and training that goes in to prepare for the Olympics, it's at a completely different level. Then you have something like the pandemic, the games get delayed by a year. What has that done for athletes, and what is the kind of pressure that's put on them?
Firstly, last year would have been very disappointing for athletes, because they'd spent 4 years just tuning themselves for a particular day, for a particular moment, and all those plans had to be put in on hold. There was a lot of uncertainty for a long period of time for athletes. Athletes did not even have a chance to train for a long period of time. And, athletes have busy bodies, and it was incredibly difficult for them mentally even to just stay locked down and locked into their homes. So all in all, it was a very difficult period for the athletic community. But I think what gives me a little bit of hope is that perhaps athletes are the most resilient people that I know of. And I think that resilience has shown in the last year as well. What has been encouraging is the start of competitions in different sports. I think over the last year or so, we've had about 200 odd world championships held in different sports. and about 40,000 athletes competing in the course of the last year. So sporting action has resumed, but of course it has been very challenging. More than them not having the ability to train and compete normally, I think the mental effect that athletes have faced has been intense. You know, athletes as a community have been perceived to be ones which are superhuman and almost immune to any kind of mental issues. But you know, we are human beings. We may be good at what we do, but we're humans first, and we are probably prone to more mental health issues than other people because of the constant pressures that we face while competing. You know, in normal life, in normal jobs, you're probably appraised once in a year, but an athlete is probably appraised once a week when he or she goes out and competes and is judged on his or her performances. There's, you know, the constant travel, the constant dealing with success and failure, also the pressure of just training, the physiological pressure that athletes face during training has a great effect mentally. And then just the pandemic coming, I think it has been very challenging also mentally for athletes. And I think that has been perhaps even more challenging than the inability to compete and restructure their plans.
So let's talk a little bit about, in terms of policy and sports in this country. When you look back at your medal, which was the first and only individual gold, and as you said, you're hoping that changes in the next few weeks, but do you think that you were able to inspire some change, wake up some slumber somewhere, to encourage people both by the government to embrace sports outside of cricket, also to encourage a bigger sports culture that, again, you've talked of many times, that we need to be a country that loves to play sport because it just loves playing it. So do you think that changed a little bit with your gold medal back then? And if not, are you concerned by that?
No, I do hope so, that I did have a little role in that, and I did, that my achievement encouraged governments and all concerned, also the private sector, to start investing more into sport. And I certainly have seen that change over the last decade or so. You know, when I started shooting, for example, perhaps 20 years ago, I started under a mango tree. Now, when a young shooter wants to start, he or she has the ability to go and start in a world-class shooting arena, an Olympic level arena, to just start off. So there is more investment, which is definitely pouring into elite athlete training. And at the policy level, definitely there is much more prioritization of sport. That can also be because, we are a young country, we're a young demographic, and a lot of young people interested in sport. I think never before in our history have we had a population which is so young, and this young population, of course, is interested in sport. So it also makes sense for politicians and for government to also invest in sport. And that definitely has seen a change, at least at the elite level. I think we go into Tokyo as a country which has seen a lot of investment into training of athletes. I mean, you look at perhaps, say, the shooting team, perhaps the most amount of money spent anywhere in the world would be in India training our athletes in a lot of sporting disciplines. At an elite level, definitely a lot of effort being put in, a lot of resources being put in by government and other agencies, private agencies, for elite level training. But we have to think beyond this, and perhaps we'll come to that at a different point in the discussions. I see the real power of sport when sport has the ability to have a great impact on communities and a great impact on societies. And while, yes, there is a lot of focus on elite level training, we also have to see how we can leverage the power of sport to imbibe values that sport gives to our young community, because we are a young population and sport can contribute to a great degree, just imbibing those values, the values of course, learning to win, but more importantly, learning to lose, the values of working hard, the values of discipline, the values of having a goal, the values of honesty and integrity.
The sports culture that you've been talking about insistently,
Absolutely.
saying that we need to imbibe that. No, but Abhinav, that has to come, I guess, at the school level, when kids are growing up, whether it's schools encouraging them, parents encouraging them, is that getting better outside of cricket? Do you see more parents happy to see their kids try something like shooting or wrestling or anything that's outside of the comfort zone of cricket and football?
I think the numbers are increasing, and we see it is encouraging to see a lot of young people try different sports. At least that is those opportunities are becoming more. But what we need to really do is, make sport a social activity. We don't need people to necessarily go to the Olympics to experience sport. We just need more people to play sports for the sheer joy of playing sport and to imbibe these values that I just talked about. But when you see numbers rising in people just involved in recreational sport, people excelling at the elite level will become a byproduct. And we do need more to be focused on giving the young India an ability to just play for the sheer joy of playing sport. And that, I think, there's still a little bit of work to do. We have a Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sport. We see a lot of work happening in sport, but I don't see so much happening in the Youth Affairs Department. And I may be poorly informed, and perhaps they're doing good work, but I can certainly see the Youth Affairs Department leverage much more on sport, and they should leverage much more on sport and find common ground and find common synergy, just to allow the youth to experience sport and to make sure that the youth imbibes the values of sport. We need a more sporting society. And we see that in different walks of life where, sometimes we don't have for example, even the pandemic has seen a lack of discipline, for example, for people to have COVID appropriate behavior. But if we were a more sporting society, I can guarantee you that we would have had a society which would have followed rules to a greater degree. Sport also teaches you how to listen and to respect different points of views. And as a society, perhaps we can also learn that from sport and be a society which also really listens, because there's great power in just listening.
Okay, I'm just checking. I think we have a question now from one of the people who have logged on. Is Somashekar there? Please, Somashekar, go ahead with your question. I have so many follow-ups myself. Somashekar, are you there? Please unmute and go ahead with your question. Unmute, not mute. I love Zoom. It reminds me of my TV days. Okay, I don't know what's happening there, but I have an interesting question from Mrigank here, Mrigank Mohan. He wants to ask you your thoughts on sports diplomacy. For instance, when ties between India and Pakistan sour for political reasons, do you think that we should continue to play sport? Do you think sports should be kept out of politics? How do you feel about maybe, in fact, using sports as a means to bridge differences between countries?
To my mind, I think sports should remain apolitical, and it should be just there for just sport. But that is in an ideal world, and we perhaps don't live in an ideal world. And there's obviously politics does come into play in sport as well. You gave the India-Pakistan situation, but we also have the unique situation of North Korea and South Korea, who played under a single team at the last Winter Olympic Games. So sport can also be really used as a means to bring communities together and to bind people together. So if used positively, I really feel that sport can be used as a tool, and it can be used in a very positive way. But to be very honest, I think sport should remain devoid of politics and should remain apolitical. Does that happen? I don't know.
It doesn't usually happen. Like you said, we don't live in an ideal world. I had a follow-up question, though, from Abhinav, what you were saying earlier about policy. Now, again, we talked about what people can do in terms of encouraging, parents and teachers encouraging children, etc. What would you like to see? Now, let's talk about the private sector first. What can the private sector do in terms of encouraging sport in this country? What would you like to see from them if you had a wish list?
I think there should be more private partnerships in sport. I think the private sector should see should really encourage sports outside of cricket as well. I think most sponsorship still goes to cricket. But what I would like to perhaps see is more private sector CSR funding going into sport. I think only 1% of the entire, or less than 1% of the entire CSR spend in our country is diverted towards sport. And if we can really build programs which are elite programs for sport, but also programs where sport binds communities and make leverage on the real power of sport to bring communities together, I'd really like more money from the private sector coming in. You have the great example of the United States, where the government doesn't even spend a single dollar to support sporting activity and doesn't even fund the USOPC. It's all private sponsorship which comes into play. But we have a long way to go into that. There is also the whole issue of, you're talking about policy. There's also the whole issue of governance, and we need to continue to improve on areas of governance as well of different sporting bodies. It has happened to a great degree, but if we see continuous growth in governance, I think that will help open doors, because I think when you talk about private money coming in, there is much more accountability. People are not very confident, or do not have the confidence to put in that money if standards of governance are weak. So we also need to see a little bit of improvement in governance.
Siddharth, are you there for your question to Abhinav? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Abhinav sir. So I have a twofold question actually. One is regarding, as a former athlete actually, who used to play taekwondo and rugby, I wanted to emphasize more on two aspects regarding federation and how athletes are still not aware about doping rights. Like, for example, I'm a lawyer. I have cases wherein athletes come to me and they are still, because I'm in Haryana mostly, I stay in Gurgaon, they are still not aware about things like dopamines and everything. So I have no clue how to help them. Second fold is, I just wanted to know what's your take on the 2020 plan, which the IOC has recently released regarding the conducting of Olympic Games, considering the fact that a lot of host cities are actually losing money than actually gaining money or seeing investments. Thank you.
So I think for the first question, I think I'll try and answer it a little bit differently. We are seeing many more athletes, young athletes, getting involved in sport program for young athletes, which is the Khelo India program. That would mean that a lot of young athletes participate in sport and devote 8 to 10 years of their lives competing in sport. That would also mean we're going to have a larger number of athletes failing in sport, because that is the real nature of sport, that you will fail more than you succeed. What we really need to do now is really to set programs which give the athletes an education, which gives athletes an opportunity to have a dual career during their sporting days. When we educate athletes and give them a basic education, I think the ability for them to imbibe all this information and all these technical information regarding doping and knowing all the rules, it will become easier. So I think we need to think beyond the just odd sanitization program or awareness campaign that athletes will have to, which they undergo to understand rules about doping, etc. We have to look much more deeply into this. Because in the next 10 years, we will have many more athletes participating in sport in India, and many more young athletes participating in sport in India. And we owe them that responsibility to make sure that they get an education and they skill up in different ways, which will help them also in their field of play, or the performances on the field of play. It will also, of course, help them know all the rules that you talked about much more. In regards to the Olympic movement, of course, there is much change happening in the Olympic movement. We already kind of have the next 3 Olympic hosts already in place. We have Paris in 24, we have Los Angeles in 28, and Brisbane most likely to be ratified in Tokyo in a couple of weeks' time. So for the next 3 Olympic cycles are already clear. But of course, to have sustainability into the Olympic movement, there has to be continuous change. Host countries cannot continue to lose money. And if you see how the Olympic movement is changing, you're seeing an urbanization of Olympic sporting disciplines. If you look at the Youth Olympic program, you have sports many young youth urban sports coming into play, urban sports being which have found life just from the street. So you have sports like breakdancing becoming an Olympic event. You have a sport like sport climbing, already an Olympic event. And I do see that there will be a greater urbanization of sporting disciplines, which will make sure that the cost associated with hosting the games may perhaps go down. The infrastructural costs may go down. So these are continuous changes that the Olympic movement is having, and I can guarantee you that they recognize the fact that they too need to continuously change and have to remain sustainable in the long run, because that's the only way they'll continue to find hosts.
Okay.
And have flexibility in rules.
We have another question now from Farhat Naik. Farhat, you want to unmute your mic, please, and go ahead with your question for Abhinav.
Hi, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, I know we are discussing the Summer Olympics here, but my question is related to Winter Olympics. I would like to know from Abhinav, sir, like how is our preparation going on for the next Winter Olympics, which is going to be held in China in the month of February?
Yeah, frankly, I don't know, because I don't follow the winter sports too much, I'm being honest with you, but I do feel that we need to have more emphasis on the winter games as well in India. There are several locations within our country which are perfect for winter sports.
Exactly.
I think Farhat is from one of those locations, right? Farhat,
yeah, I'm from Gulmarg, Kashmir.
Yes, so I think that's a perfect location to promote
sir.
sport.
Exactly.
Promote sport, and I think we need to also invest a little bit in it. It's a long-term investment, but again, if you bring communities together to sport, the earlier programs, earlier point that I was making, that you have to invest in sport, of course, at the elite level, but also have parallel programs which bring communities, involve communities as well. That's where you're going to be able to justify investment into sport, and that's what we want. That's what I'd like to see in the next decade or so in Indian sport, and I'd love to see more investment go into winter sport. That would obviously mean that we have a stronger team. But of course, in our history, we've had a very small contingent of athletes who participate at the Winter Games.
The Winter Olympics.
And I'd like to see that change over the course of time.
Thank you, Farhat, for that. In fact, I saw this past winter in Gulmarg myself, Abhinav. People have this amazing ability. They're skiing, they're doing it. They've learned, with local instructors. They're so good, they're talented, but there is this infrastructure that's lacking that we still, really need to work on. I wanted to ask you, though, coming back to the issue of the current Olympics in Tokyo, and you've been very optimistic that India could win a lot of medals this time, and best hopes seem to be pinned on your sport, which is shooting. Tell us about that. I mean, who are you really pinning your hopes on in particular?
Yeah, but I am hopeful because firstly, I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm just a sports fan. I wasn't very optimistic as an athlete, but I've become optimistic as a fan. So that's where my hope comes from. But in all seriousness, we go into the Olympic Games in Tokyo with many of our athletes starting as world number ones. We have never before in our history have we gone into a games with athletes in several sporting disciplines starting as absolute favorites. That's never happened. That, of course, gives rise to a lot of potential to win medals. How
did that happen in shooting? How did shooting become a sport where we've excelled in so much?
I think it captured the imagination of young people. I mean, when I started taking part at our national championships, we had about 200 people who took part in our nationals. If you go to our nationals now, we have about 10,000 people taking part at our nationals, and 10,000 waiting to qualify just to get to the nationals. We have shooting as part of the curriculum in CBSE schools. We have about 1 lakh of students who have access to basic shooting range in schools. So a lot of young people, all walks of life, have gotten involved in the sport. We have a very young team going into Tokyo. We've also seen a lot of investment in our youth program, in our junior program. And there I'd like to commend both the government and our national federation for having that vision to spend half of their yearly budget into youth programs, into junior programs, And this has been happening systematically for the last 10 years or so. And we're seeing those dividends now, where a lot of our young athletes, even junior athletes, excelling at the elite level. And of course, I'm really, really optimistic of what Tokyo can do for sport. It could be a historic games for India with potentially our best ever performance.
All right, Pranjal, you have a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, all right. As we have seen that sports has been basically, we have sports facilities in the tier 1 cities, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, and in tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities, we rarely have sports facilities, and we don't have a mindset to leverage like a society mindset to leverage sports. So how do we improve upon this? How do we democratize sporting facilities? My question is that.
Yeah, I think we need to take sport to the people. We need to invest as investing in our youth. We have to invest in sporting facilities. Basic infrastructure needs to be created in rural areas, in smaller cities, and just give people access to just go and play and enjoy sport. Not to excel in it, but to just imbibe values of sport. Also the health benefits of sport, which are immense, but also the values that sport brings to people. We just need more emphasis on it, and we need more policies in place, I think, which allow this infrastructure to be built all across the country. And this doesn't need to be some really expensive infrastructure. It has to be basic infrastructure, but well-kept infrastructure, and also creating that ecosystem which manages this infrastructure. We need decent quality coaches to be available at these smaller stadia. So I think just investing in this infrastructure from a youth developmental point of view, I think will be very important in the years to come. And I hope that happens. I hope the youth departments of our country really starts, finding that synergy with the sports department, which falls under the same ministry.
Yeah, I have a question about how we need to empower coaches, because I think we often don't realize how important a coach is for any athlete in any sport. And do you think we're doing enough to focus on empowering them, encouraging them, because there's a whole ecosystem in which an athlete works and trains. How do you see that?
I'd like to see now the next decade of investment into sport in India go to really empower the ecosystem that surrounds the athlete. There's quite a lot happening at the athlete level, but now it's really the opportune time to invest in coaches, empower them, make them world-class, not just coaches, the support staff, the physios, the trainers, the strength and conditioning experts, all of them need to be empowered and brought to a world-class level, because that will take us to the next level in our sporting performance. And I really hope that investment starts to happen to really strengthen that ecosystem that you just talked about. Still a little bit of time, not seeing that happening to a great degree so far, but I am positive and hopeful that will start as well.
I also wanted to ask you, how important is it for us as a society, as people, to believe that we can win a gold medal? Because, apart from your individual gold medal, it's eluded us. So are we lacking I think your Bijli's gone, but we're going
it
to
has,
continue.
But I can hear you. I look a little
It's fine.
scary, but hopefully come back.
We can make out some kind of, you look a little ghost-like, but it's interesting. We should have some drama. Oh, it's back. It's back. The drama's gone. No, but is it that we lack a certain belief that we can win? I mean, is there, or that we don't have that hunger for gold? What is it that's holding us back from realizing our full potential? Because it's clearly there. It's a question of realizing it. So what do you think it is?
I think we're going to see that change. I'm very positive. If you look at our young boys and girls of today's generation, they have, they're really empowered. I mean, they have that self-belief, which my generation, or at least I definitely didn't. I came from a very defensive generation. When I was growing up in my sporting career, I was involved in a very lonely sport, but I had one constant companion, which was self-doubt. But I don't see that anymore. I see this young generation just knowing that they will win. They just have that self-belief. They have that faith. And I think that we are seeing that exposure, more exposure. I think there's much more exposure at all levels of society. And we're seeing that change happening, not just in the sporting world, but also in all areas of society, whether these young boys and girls just have that belief, have that determination and guts.
But you said, but sorry, just, because you said that you kind of grew up with self-doubt. You overcame that, obviously, and went on to get the highest honor one can get in sport. Tell us about those days when you had that self-doubt. I mean, how did you take up shooting? What were your parents aghast that you could even think of this as something that you'd want to train in and focus on full time? What was it like?
Yeah, okay, with the self-doubt thing, I think I never overcame it. I just lived to coexist with it, like we're coexisting with the virus. So I learned to coexist with self-doubt. But maybe what I tried to do, what I tried to really go after a certain point of time in my sporting career, where I just was not able to get this self-belief, I started chasing self-respect. And that was a very defining moment of my life and a very defining moment of my sporting career. How did I achieve that self-respect? It was about by giving it my all every single day, by looking myself into the mirror every evening and asking myself the question, have I given it my best today? It was not every 4 years for me. It was every day for me. I had to be better than what I was yesterday. That was my goal. When I went into Beijing, for example, I looked into my mirror the night before I left for Beijing and took my flight, and I asked myself the question, have I given it my best the last 4 years and done everything humanly possible to prepare for these Olympics? And the answer was yes. And there I had achieved my self-respect. And I was a winner already. I was a winner in my own eyes, even before I shot my first shot at the Olympic Games, because I had gained my self-respect. And that is how I lived my life. And that is what I really chased. And that gave me that security during my sporting career. As far as your question about my parents and my family, I was very, very fortunate to have had a very, very enabling environment. My family, of course, supported me materially, but more importantly, they were great believers. They were great believers in my dream.
That's very important.
And, my dream became their dream. I used to feel hopeless most of the time, but every time I felt hopeless, they continued to see a lot of hope in me. And that was a very safe environment where I practiced my sport and pushed myself every day out of my comfort zone. And that psychologically safe environment, which I was very fortunate to have, was critical in my success, because when you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, you're also giving more chances that you would fall down. And every time I fell down, there was somebody to hold my hand and say that you're gonna win, and you're gonna win one day. One of my greatest stories came in Athens at the 2004 Olympic Games, where after breaking an Olympic record, I finished 7th in the Olympic final. I had to shoot 10 very ordinary shots at that Olympic final to win a medal, but I just ended up shooting the 10 worst shots of my life. And 5 minutes after this Olympic final, when my world had crushed and had had broken in front of me, I met my mother. And my mother came up to me and said, the maximum you could have won today was a bronze or a silver at the most, but you are going to go and win a gold medal, and you're going to go and win it in 4 years' time. And who can argue against a mother's instinct? It came true.
Yeah, you can't argue against a mother's instinct. Abhinav, though, when you look at now the Tokyo Games, and you've explained why India, and it's true, why India has been doing so well in shooting. But what are some of the other sports you think where we stand a chance at winning medals, where we've really sort of done leaps and bounds over the last few years in terms of where we stand today? Where do your other hopes lie?
I do hope medals in weightlifting. I see women's weightlifting as a good hope already. I think on day 1 or day 2 of the games. I of course look at wrestling. We have a couple of wrestlers who are world class going in as world number ones. We have a boxer who's world number 1. Badminton, of course, we've had really good success over the last few years. So badminton also is a hope. And I really, really hope that there's a breakthrough in archery because we really have world-class archers. Deepika Kumari just recently won couple of medals at their Paris event and is world number one. She was also world number one going into the London Games. And there are several archers who've performed consistently, but have not had that breakthrough at the Olympics as yet. And I really hope for them that there is a breakthrough in that sport. It will do that sport the world of good. But there are a bunch of sports which I think have the capability to win. Even athletics, for example, our javelin thrower, Neeraj Chopra has a good chance of maybe winning a medal. So there are lots of athletes from a varied group of sports and events where we certainly have a realistic potential and a realistic chance at a medal.
Okay, I have a question here from Arun Karthik. He's the director of sports at Geetham University. And he has asked what your thoughts are on how important a formal education is for athletes. They don't necessarily give importance to a professional or vocational education, but do you think that it is important for athletes to have that?
Excellent question. And I'm a great believer that it is very important. I talked about that dual career, and I talked about the importance of having an education. You know, what athletes are guilty in most parts of their career, and I was one of them, is that we equate a gold medal to happiness, whereas we have to reverse that equation and make happiness our gold medal. We are guilty of putting all our eggs in one basket and just being very focused on just one thing, which is good in a certain way, but after a period of time, we lose balance. We lose balance in life, and which after a while almost holds us back to achieve our true potential. And I believe, even me personally, I think I may have achieved my goal, but I did not achieve my true potential. And the reason being, I was too bloody minded. I was too focused on and obsessed on just one thing in life. And had I had this balance, I of course was fortunate to have an education, but had I had a little bit more balance, I think I would have succeeded more. So an education, absolutely important. I think it's not just an athlete's career that we have to look at. We also have to look at their post-career, and we look at athletes struggling to have that smooth transition out of sport. And that is pretty much because they've not skilled up in another sphere in life. And unfortunately in life, there are no free lunches. The sporting career ends, and it generally ends quite abruptly. And athletes are often left quite unprepared to face life after that. So I think an education really helps. Skilling them up to something else will also help in their post-career. And I do believe having this will also enable them to have that balance, which will also enable them to perform better on the field of play.
I like this next question that's come in from an anonymous attendee who's asking, what is the sport that you like to watch apart from shooting? What's your favorite sport?
I like to watch tennis. I even like to watch cricket. I like break dancing. I love breaking. I can never dance. I am a very poor dancer, and I didn't even consider it much of a sport. But once I watched it at the Youth Olympic Games a few years ago, I was just blown away at what these athletes do, and it was really enjoyable just to see how the community was involved in it. It was really heartening and it was interesting. I really enjoy watching sport climbing, another new discipline at the Olympics.
All right. So you confess that you like watching cricket also from time to time, but just connected to that, when you see the kind of money, and the infrastructure that goes into cricket, and that's obvious because it's a passion in this country. What do you think non-cricketing sports need in this country? Do you need like a BCCI of your own, a big sports body or an institution of your own, which it's like an umbrella body? I don't know if it already exists, but I'm just asking you as a layperson, but something that would encourage sports outside of cricket in a much bigger way.
I think the BCCI, of course, has also done good work, and they've not just become the richest sporting body in India, and perhaps one of the richest sports body in the world, just like that. So I think more other sports bodies can also learn from the good work they've done. I'm not a complete fan of their work, but they also have done good work. I think each sport body, what they have to actively do is actively go and connect with their fans. They have to find their fans, and these fans do exist. I mean, if in my sport there are 10,000 people going to a nationals and another 10,000 waiting to just qualify for the nationals, you already have an ecosystem which is probably 50, 60,000 people who follow this sport. But with these, our sporting bodies have to really now really focus on connecting with them, have really good fan engagement. And if we see that happening, that money, what you talked about, will start pouring into these different sports. It will not just happen just because it is the right thing to do. Any sponsor who will want to put $1 in or a rupee into sport in India, they want something back. It is just the way the world works, and let's not be too naive about it. So we have to see these sports bodies really think in that way. They have to actively engage with fans and have that database ready, have that viewership ready. If you take suppose you take your, say, shooting, for example, and say that you have 60,000 people who will watch this sporting event and will be engaged in this sporting event, people will suddenly start thinking differently and maybe invest a little bit more into tournaments. But I think that job of marketing sport has to be done much more efficiently. And I do hope all these sporting bodies look at this aspect in a much more serious manner. At the moment, they seem content with all the resources that are made available by the government. And I hope that, which is great. I think the government is spending much more money on it, and I love that aspect. But I just hope that it doesn't make these sporting bodies too lazy to actively also become self-sustainable to a great degree, which I think the opportunity is there. I think the next decade will be a decade of sport in India and seeing sport develop much more. So it is up to these bodies to really work on different areas of developing sport.
We have 5-7 minutes left, Abhinav. So let me first ask you, what has it been like for you, after you stopped, after you retired, in a sense, from shooting? What's it been like on the other side? And, you mentioned that often sports persons don't realize how short-lived a sports career can be and how abruptly it ends. What was that like for you to transition, and what is it like now?
I think one of the few things I did well in my sporting career, and I didn't do too many right, did not get too much of it right, was plan my transition quite well. So my decision was not abrupt. I think it took me 3 years to come to an understanding that the Rio Games will be my last sporting competition. And ironically enough, I've never even gone back to a shooting range after that day in Rio. Even people ask me, do I do it for fun? I answer them back, when was it ever fun? But I planned my transition. I realized that there will be a big change in self-identity, and I'm still transitioning to have a new self-identity. I don't look back at my past so seriously. I had a little bit of success. I have, of course, had a lot of failure, but I don't carry my past with me. I try and live in the present, and that's what sport taught me, to really live life in the present moment. Sport also taught me that you cannot jump peaks, and if you want to have sustained success, you have to climb down the mountain and then try and climb a mountain again. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to climb the mountain of life and a different mountain. And it may not be as exciting as competing in an Olympic final, and it might not be as exciting as winning a gold medal at the Olympics, but I'm perfectly at peace with that. And I try and derive pleasure from the little things I do, the little goals that I set, and I'm happy about it. Of course, I am involved in a business of mine, which I'm trying to build. I'm also, my primary outreach out to Indian sport is through my foundation, where I have quite a few programs running for sport. We have a program for intervention, we have a program for education, and we have a program for using the power of sport for societal good. So that keeps me very engaged, that keeps me busy, and that is a fulfilling thing that I do. I spend half of my time just on my foundation, and I just feel happy doing it. So
I think it's lovely what you said. It's not just for athletes, Abhinav, what you said about, you've climbed a big mountain, as exciting as the Olympics, and now you're trying to climb the mountain of life. You're climbing another mountain. It's true for so many of us. And that's a lovely life lesson. Really, really lovely life lesson. We have time for a couple of more questions. Soma Shekhar is here. Soma Shekhar, go ahead with your question, but you'll have to unmute your mic, please. Don't forget.
Sorry for this thing, whatever has happened. Yeah. So, sir, I have a couple of questions, sir, like related to the technology. I believe that now in the 21st century, it's said that athletes are made, not born, because the amount of technology which has gotten into a sport, it helps you to learn a lot from your mistake. For example, the Hawkeye, the analysis of I am a tennis player, so basically I'm like, you understand your service problem and the way you play, the style you put in. So it makes you to avoid the mistakes as well. So my question is that can we not link the, can we not use the technological universities such as IITs and NITs to develop technology which can be affordable for an athlete so that he could improve his game? So because that would, in the future, that would definitely, make him more successful in the sport by
Okay.
avoiding
Or her.
yeah, definitely, or it can be
Okay.
gender neutral also
Yes,
nowadays.
absolutely. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting question. Abhinav, you want to take that?
No, absolutely.
Thanks.
Very good question. And, my whole life has been I leverage on science and technology to a great degree. And my work in my foundation is just to bring global best practice in science and technology and make that accessible to athletes. You talked about analytics and all of that. I call it STEAM. What we need to put into athlete training is science, technology, engineering, analytics, and medicine, and incorporate all these elements into grassroots level training. And of course, technology plays a great role in it. That's where the last 0.1% lies. That is where you get the edge. That is what probably differentiates a winner from 10th place at the Olympics. It is that edge, and that's where technology is continuously evolving, and athletes and sporting organizations have to remain alive to it. So a very good point. Of course, I'd love to see more educational institutions be involved in the development of technology and things where what sport can leverage on. Even analytics is something which is a big thing. Of course, I'd love to see IITs, the more IITs involved in it, but perhaps we can already see the Geetham University take a leap into it. At least we can at least leverage that.
One more question.
We're out of time. Thank you so much, Abhinav. It's been so inspiring to listen to you and everything that you're doing, giving back to sports. All these years later, your story is like I said, you're written in history as the first and only individual Olympic gold medalist for India. So we do hope, like you do, that changes for India at Tokyo. Thank you so much for speaking to us here at Geetham University, for all that you do. You're a good person also because you're a dog lover. I know that. I don't know how many other people know that, but I do know that people who love dogs are good people. So thanks so much, Abhinav.